It's publicly said that Premier Wynne and Minister Gravel have both publicly said, okay, maybe divestment isn't the best option. Maybe there's other options out there. So to us, they've left the door open, but they haven't, behind the scenes, they haven't truly opened the door. And I think that's our biggest goal now. It's one thing for government to say the right things, and we're happy that they've done that. Like Minister Gravel and Premier Wynne have been a lot more open than Premier McGuinty and former Minister Bartolucci on this issue. So we'll grant them that, but it's time to, from what our partners are telling us, it's time that they truly open the door and ask for that other options that other than divestment.
And those next steps are very important. Do we have a plan in place? Are you, you know, it's one thing to stand up in the House and say, don't do this. Are you able to say to them, here's what needs to happen?
I think there could be a viable plan in place. There has been several preliminary plans put forward. But before we can go any farther, the government has to say, okay, well, we will. See you later, Tina. The government has to say that we really truly want to see those plans before we can put a lot more effort into it. They're there, but if no one's listening, how far can you go with the plan?
John, when you look at Europe and you look at the US in terms of rail and what is happening in Northern Ontario, are we economically crippling ourselves by, you know, stemming that rail service?
Well, we have got the infrastructure here. We're here celebrating the last spike 81 years ago, and we have that infrastructure. The reason it was built is because the way we are set up in Northern Ontario, it's not conducive for private enterprise. But for a public enterprise to provide the service so private enterprise can actually use it, that's worked for a long time. Does it have to be tweaked? I don't think anyone's disputing at this point. But we've always said to just throw it out to the wind and say, well, let it go, we're going to have the ONTC garage sale? That has never made any sense. That was some bean counter in Toronto who looked at his graph and said, oh, we could save $100 million by doing this, and they never looked at actually what the true cost was going to be and what the long-term cost was going to be for the government.
I think, like most Northerners, Northerners were offended when the government said, you don't deserve proper public transportation in the North. We're just going to cancel the ONR. We're going to take 100 years of development and we're going to sell it off as a fire sale. Fortunately, we stopped the fire sale. Our issue now is getting the transportation on the train back, the public train. There's a lot that can be done. Number one is people have to believe it can be done. People have to keep the pressure on. We're working great with the municipalities. The unions have been great. I know that there's management at Ontario Northland who have ideas on how to do this. What we need to do is get the government to wake up and realize that people in Northern Ontario have a right to public transit, just like people in Southern Ontario. We're tired of being second class, and we're going to fight to get our train back.
And from a federal standpoint, I mean, you know, this is a provincial issue, but there is more there at the federal level to play into this.
There was a federal subsidy for passenger train service that helped the ONTC. There's been discussion of a federal port that could possibly make a difference. Unfortunately, the federal government, the Conservative government, are not wanting to invest in the kind of infrastructure that's needed. But that being said, regardless of whether it's federal or provincial, we need a plan to ensure that our communities are sustainable. And part of that sustainability is having good public transit. I don't know how many stories I've heard this winter of near misses on the roads, of students coming home that would have been on the train, of senior citizens who are sick and going down for cancer treatments, being on cars and on buses. The train is something that has served our communities, and what's really outrageous in terms of the government's attempt to cut the train services, the train was running better in the last few years than it's run in years. So it's a viable service, it's a good service, and we want it back.
Looking at Europe, looking at the United States and what they're doing with their rail, are we crippling ourselves economically by doing what is happening here?
You see it all across Canada, this myopic view about rail, that rail is somehow some anachronism. While the rest of the world goes to high speed, we're chugging along with our systems. In Northern Ontario, the idea that they would have a fire sale of the transportation corridor that connects everything from even northwestern Quebec all the way to James Bay down to Toronto just shows the lack of foresight, the lack of vision. We've invested in this infrastructure, we built this infrastructure, the telecommunications alone is top rate. What we need is a commitment to say, how do we make it work even better in the 21st century? That's forward thinking. That's what the rest of the world's doing. It's time Ontario woke up.
Yeah, it is. It's trying to give people some positives about the ONTC. It's still here. It's provided a wonderful service over the last 110 years, and 81 since the last spike. But also to draw upon about the future, talk about the future. The government's saying all these wonderful things about a viable option. Ms. Wynne said that. The minister said that. We know in our conversations with the mayor, though we can't say a heck of a lot about the Minister Advisory Committee. He's telling, he's lobbying them to put together a viable option, and he knows the only way to do that is have the management and the unionized workers put together that plan, and that can only happen if the government makes a phone call to the unions, the GCA heads, and say, listen, get in a room with the management, put together that viable option that they say they want, and we're just here to try to identify that we need that phone call. Ms. Wynne, Mr. Gravel, please call us. And they have our number. They have Ron Marlow's number, who's the president of the GCA, and that's really what today's about as well.
You certainly have the first papers ready to go. Like if they called you, you could meet with them in the next hour.
Yeah, we could do it, start working right now. Yeah, exactly. We're ready. Some of our people, it's vacation time and whatnot, but our people are ready and willing to go. They're on a minute's notice. We'll be able to come wherever they want us to, or here in North Bay to put that plan together. It will take some time, but we're willing to meet right now.